That's a separate podcast question in itself. But like in some sense, RevOps owns strategy, and along with the data explosion that happened, it became the central team who can study data and help business make the right decisions.
This first 6 months that you kind of took this role, right? How was that first 6 months for you?
So we were just able to put a lot more high quality content out there, and that content built as a genuine brand, right? Because we were built for RevOps by RevOps people.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of this podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with Adithya. And Adithya has been a RevOps person and then moved into a marketing role with Everstage. Everstage is actually solving problems for RevOps folks, right? So, with that said, Adithya, welcome to the podcast. I would love for you to, introduce our audience in terms of what you do. Right, a brief intro about yourself.
Podcast. Super thrilled to be here. I handle marketing at Everstage. We are a sales commissions automation platform, and we've been there for close to 4 years. I joined the company early on, employee number 7 as the first marketing hire, and I had the pleasure of building a great marketing team over the last 3 years or so. And today, we're a 125 people plus company, and marketing is somewhere close to 14 folks. I used to be in RevOps before, so I had a curious career phase where I started my career as a data scientist or data analytics person, and then moved into a product management team to do product analytics. And one thing led to another, and I was part of a marketing team for 1.5 years, where I was handling basically marketing operations and analytics. Post that, just instead of just handling for marketing, what on handle for the entire revenue spectrum, and I had a chance to join the revenue operations team at Freshworks, and it was very early on. This was back in 2018 or so, and then I joined there, and that's the time where Freshworks was sub 100 million in ARR, and I was there for 3 years. Where within that phase, we reached somewhere close to 350 ARR, million in ARR, and that's when I was in revenue operations. And the experience in revenue operations is again a little bit full spectrum. In a fast growing company, you get to see the entire thing from planning to execution to compensation to everything. And that was such a fulfilling experience. And post that, I wanted to move back into marketing and give it a shot. And the opportunity in Everstage opened up, and I joined the show.
Got it. Yeah, thanks. So there's a follow-up question on that. So the RevOps as a function is pretty new, especially for Indians, right? It's been there since quite some time in the US. I've spoken to a lot of US counterparts who talk about a lot of RevOps, right? So what is RevOps? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a separate podcast question in itself. But to summarize, in some extent, RevOps is not new. The name RevOps might be very new, but basically, what used to exist in 2010 is a function called business operations, which is responsible for GTM strategy, GTM technology, etc. And there was IT team who was owning technology implementation like a CRM rollout, CPQ rollout, commissions management rollout, etc. There was finance involved as well. And then there was a sales operations function, which was basically handling the entire sales flow, right? Like getting the order form, ensuring billing is happening properly and customers are getting the invoices, and help with the contract, etc. And RevOps basically came to the need because of to have something like that centralized where a single team can do all of this. Like in some sense, RevOps owns strategy. Like if you were to think about what markets to go after, how to hire for, and what revenue targets to deploy, and what are the initiatives we need to be taking, and looking at the full funnel, and then saying, hey, these are the metrics that we need to optimize for. We need to get better at conversion rate for from a marketing to sales SQL, and we need to accelerate our pipeline. How can we close shorter? So the scope of RevOps itself is the scope of a GTM organization in any company. So it starts with strategy, but along with strategy, the core skill set any RevOps person should have is data analytics and ability to look at large scales of data and infer what's the best business metrics and practice around it. And with that, if you tie up the latest marketing tech stack, sales tech stack put together and owning that end to end, it's basically a function where you get to wear a lot of different hats and understand at a bird's eye view of strategy, as well as go into the nitty gritties with the data and work with people. Right? Like that's the most exciting part about RevOps is you get to work with sales leaders, help them understand the business goals, as well as ensure that's getting translated to each of the sales team members. And at scale, it's a super exciting role because the challenges are immense, but the impact a very good revenue operations person can have on a business is just super interesting, right? Because it can be as simple as, hey, let's change pricing strategy for this region because we aren't winning a lot of deals due to currency comparison or something, and then making a recommendation to make that happen, to as good as going to the depths of sales and then say, hey, maybe in this region we are super understaffed and we can probably have a lot more demand in the market, so let's double down and hire for more people, working with HR
Hmm.
and finance and making use cases around that, right? So in
Got it.
simple terms, DevOps is just a culmination of a lot of different functions over the year. And along with the data explosion that happened, it became the central team who can study data and help business make the right decisions.
Got it. Like you said, I have a lot of follow up questions on that, but I'm not going to get to that. So I would basically I want to understand in a simple term what does average stage solve for. So you kind of said it's a lot of things, right? So you're solving for a very particular or a, let's say, a single problem in RevOps under RevOps, right? So
Correct.
what do you do, at every stage?
So, if you think about any sales org of, let's say, you have 50 sales reps or so, right? And your sales reps are one of the most metric driven teams, right? They will carry goals, they will have revenue targets. And most of the times, it's because it's measurable, they can also be incentivized to on that scale, right? To say, hey, if you overachieve on
Hmm.
your revenue goals, we'll pay you more. If you, are able to go hit a few other revenue goals specifically, we'll pay you more. It's basically that component of the variable pay every sales rep has to be able to automate the variable pay, provide visibility to
Hmm.
your sales reps in real time on how much they're going to earn, and
Hmm.
basically process commissions at scale. So, in summary, it's just a commissions automation platform, but it's
Got
just
it.
more than that because your reps are also be able to see how much they're going to earn, which is super important to keep your reps motivated. Because like we are in marketing, like we don't mostly have variable pay or other stuff, so we know exactly how much we're going to make, right? But if you think of any sales rep in any company, what's going to happen is, hey, they'll have either quarterly incentives or a monthly incentive plan, and so at the middle of the month, they won't know how much they're going to make. And
Hmm.
no tool today
Got
provides
it.
that in a very meaningful form. That's what Devastage solves for.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I'll probably dive into marketing as well. So one, do you think you've had an advantage of doing this marketing for an early stage company, right? And because you were a RevOps person earlier, right? Do you think that kind of added as an advantage into starting as a first hire, probably marketing hire for Everstage, and basically understand because you were basically the audience, right? You're selling to yourself. If I look at it, so how was that transition helped you, or how was that experience of being a RevOps person helped into a marketing role? And when you a follow up question on that is when you joined as a first marketer, what did you do? I mean, I know it's difficult, right? Because jumping straight into marketing, you kind of have a lot of different channels, right? You don't know which ones to start, which one to focus on, right? So how was that transition helped, or how was that thing helped you in terms of from a RevOps person to move into marketing, and then moving into marketing, the journey of becoming that 0 to 1 marketer, and focusing on demand creation, capturing demand capture, right? So how did you do that? I mean, what was that initial thought, and how was that this first 6 months that you kind of took this role, right? How was that first 6 months for you?
Yeah. Bunch of interesting questions. I'll try to go one by one. Right? So, joining into marketing from a revenue operations perspective was different, but I used to see marketing before.
Hmm.
Like I was part of actually Arvind Parthiban's team, the co-founder of CEO of SuperOps, for close to 1.5 years at Freshworks when he joined. So I get to see directly the kind of brand initiatives and events and demand initiatives that they were doing, and I was program managing some of those areas
Hmm.
and operationalizing some of those things. So I had a view into it, but I haven't done it before. And moving from RevOps into marketing, I wouldn't have taken that call if not for Everstage, because
Hmm.
with Everstage, there was a very unique proposition that I brought into the table even as a marketer from day one, which is I had the subject matter expertise. Like
Hmm.
I used to sit and process commissions for 200 people at Freshworks. Every quarter, I used to sit for 2 to 3 days, fully calculate all the commissions and then communicate to them in Excels and get it signed by them that their commission numbers are correct, and then transfer it to finance and HR teams and ensure they're getting it paid. And post payment, they will have some queries on how it works. So I've seen that full spectrum. I did it for 2 years. So when I joined here, what I brought to the table and my first 6 month agenda was very clear. Like I can just write about that. Like basically that particular part of the journey of how does sales commission processing work and what are the best practices that we do and how does RevOps works, because most of our I would say the buyer persona is around revenue operations, sales operations, and sales compensation.
Hmm.
Because I've done all that, it was easy for me to take the leap of faith and join into a marketing team. But what is super important is also understand your limitations, right? Like I was sure from day one, like I haven't written at scale before. I'm not going to
Hmm.
be a great writer as is. My first version will have a lot more context probably, but it still is not going to be finished. So the first 6 months, we were quickly able to get someone super smart onboarded into a firm who was our initial content writer, and since then shaped up to be our head of PMM as well. So when we had that person, we were basically tag teaming into our efforts, where
Hmm.
I get to work on the content side of things and write about something quickly over 2 days, and then she used to edit it over a week or so, and then get it out there. So we were able to use the unique advantage we had into just put out great content out there that can resonate with all our audience. And early on, for the first 6 months, the product market fit wasn't there, and
Hmm.
it was during COVID as well. So people were still figuring out what's going to happen to the rest of the world. So they weren't really curious to buy a lot of products. So that also gave us some breathing space to get our positioning right, our messaging right, and to experiment with different forms of content and demand. And one of the main ways in which we also worked is to, we used to celebrate every social like from our buyer persona. Like, can we
Hmm.
post some good content out there in our social media and try
Hmm.
to get some interesting engagement? And the curious thing is, no one in our at that point in time was putting memes as a form of content to
Hmm.
engage. So we used to post a lot of revenue operations, sales commissions related memes out there because we've seen that before. So I was able to resonate with that. And the context is our CEO Siva Rajamani also used to head RevOps at Freshworks when I
Hmm.
joined the RevOps team there. So with that, the entire founding team of Everstage early on in the GTM side. So the product manager person used to work with us at Freshworks as part of RevOps team. The head of solutions and customer success was part of that. So all four of us came from a RevOps background. So we were just able to put a lot more high quality content out there. And that content built as a genuine brand, right? Because we were
Hmm.
built for RevOps by RevOps people. And that was our early on messaging as well. So that is the first two questions that you answered. And
Got it.
in terms of the third question around not getting overwhelmed by too many channels and stuff, and I think that's an area where we also quickly realized what's going to be our learnings, right? Like within the first 6 to 9 months, we figured out this is not going to be a high, fast moving SMB space. This is probably going to be a space where you have to go after the big whales and get those mid market enterprise customers. So we were clear some of the things that worked at Brushworks or firms like that are not really going to be our playbook. So that also really helped because we can think from an angle of where will a revenue operations person go? What will they consume? And how can we be in front of them instead of just playing, hey, let's just bid on Google Ads and try to capture demand in the
Hmm.
market. That still came later down the line, but that was when it happened to us, it was a more targeted strategy rather than throw every money from funding into there and hope it works out kind of a approach. So that really helped us be very thoughtful about demand.
Okay, got it. So when you also mentioned that you kind of created a lot of content initially, right? So how did you said predominantly focused on social media, right? Is it predominantly social media, or have you distributed that content across other channels as well, right? How did you look at PMM? Like you said, the person who you hired, right, is went on to, right now that person is a, head of PMM, right? How did that role evolve? And also, from early stage where you started creating content, right? How did you know as a marketer that you want to distribute this content, and how do you know that this audience? How did you choose some of those channels based on? Did you choose it based on your gut, or did you choose it based on your, let's say, for example, LinkedIn as a channel, right? Especially when it comes to RevOps, I strongly believe that the sales ops, RevOps, and all of those guys, including the sales marketing folks, they're active, very very active on LinkedIn, right? So anybody who's selling a technology, let's say martech or a sales tech product, right, should actively push it themselves predominantly on LinkedIn, right? So how did choosing that channel, like initially you decided to choose a channel in terms of distribution, and when you wrote, what did you write? I mean, did you write very short form? Did you write a long form content like a blog post or something, or did you start creating some form of a landing page to like the problems you solved, and or is it like a text based or a video based content that you've created, shared it in social media? Like, how did you decide what to do, and how did you distribute that content very early?
Yeah. In terms of deciding what to do itself, we were very clear from our mind that we're not ready. We're not going to immediately be able to convert customers because sales commissions is a existing space with a lot of legacy vendors who've been there for a while. So our objective was to just add value and measure in terms of, hey, how many clicks are you able to get from US to come visit your blog? That's
Mm,
more crucial. How many engagement on a social post by a CEO around a topic that we wrote from marketing is getting. That is more important than trying to capture demand and try to do the landing page route. So what we created was a different form of content, but primarily initial days it was again the classic marketing playbook, right? Like blogs, putting a couple of good guides out there, and then
mm,
doing some short form video content, creating some infographics, and lately carousels as well. And basically, one of the ways in which I started was one of social posts that where I had personal inhibition as well in terms of social media, and I haven't done social media before. So
mm,
as a fresher, you're going and putting your first social post, you're super worried about how people are going to judge whether you're going to get any likes or something. And then what I did is, okay, let me just add value, right? What is around compensation out there that people don't know today? And then it starts with how do you create the best sales comp plan? Like what thought should go behind it? And then I created a six series out of it. And I think demystifying sales plans is what I
mm.
called it back then. And then just
Nice.
wrote six social posts and put it down in Canva, just creating random tables for accelerators and just creating random things. Very little efforts because there's no design bandwidth available as well. And then just posting it on our social and then seeing what happens. And that basically got a lot of good traction. Like, getting the initial post, getting 100 likes at that point in time was super crucial because that validated the hypothesis, okay, nobody's putting this kind of content out there. Now that meant, okay, we can create these content. People do resonate with this content, and I was already connected to a lot
Yeah.
of RevOps folks as well. So that meant, how do we distribute this at scale? You're gonna do the basic social posting for your blog, getting it out there in your social media, getting a few people's handles. But then, what else can you do? And then there are very few kind people back then who helped us out as well. Like there are a few newsletters where cold reach out and then say, "Hey, we wrote this post about this particular topic. Would you like to feature it?" And there was a DevOps newsletter and a couple of communities and LinkedIn groups as well. And we started posting our content through these channels and getting into all those LinkedIn groups and then saying, hey, every time you publish a blog, go to these 7 LinkedIn groups around RevOps, Sales Ops, Sales Comp, and post it there saying, hey, we wrote this piece around this. And to not be spammy, we just divided it among the team. So a few of us will post in few different groups as such. And then the newsletter channel, and then we did community as well. What quickly we understood is the best form of distribution that worked for us early on was community. Once you start being part of Slack communities and start posting your content out there, and especially imagine you wrote a content about how to create a great sales commission plan. And then someone has a question, hey, I'm tasked with creating a new sales commission plan as part of my new
Mm,
job. So
mm,
now you don't have to just answer that question with theory. You can just say, hey, like, that's a wonderful question. We wrote this blog about this particular
mm,
topic. Take a look and let me know. I'll be happy to jump on a call. And I've personally jumped on call with close to 10, 20 people over the course of
mm.
6 months, just helping them out with their sales comp plan, best practices, etc. And that actually led to a few of our early customers as well who came to the community, saw us, and then realized, okay, these guys know what they're doing when it comes to sales compensation. So the product must be good. So let me give it a try to see when creating a plan. Let me as well think about how I will automate it as well. So that then became the main distribution channel where we realized, okay, can we then figure out a way to partner with these communities and distribute even more to at scale, right? Uh, yeah.
Got it. I actually had that question also. I wanted to ask you that question because you answered it already. So the question was because I think your LinkedIn profile says you're part of multiple communities, right? So there's RevOps and Rev Collective, Modern Sales Pros, right? And there are much more. Uh, I wanted to ask you how do you leverage these communities, which you've answered, right? But then how do you balance your time between these, managing, responding to these communities right now versus, I mean, about 3 years back,
Yeah.
right, very early stage, right? You wanted to basically figure out, listen to, and for me also, the best part of being in communities is you can learn a lot. Listen to what market is saying, and there are people who are actively looking and trying to solve some of the problems that you're trying to solve, right? So how have you gained from these communities earlier, and which you kind of said, right, you tried answering a lot of questions about sales commissions and stuff, right? How do you do it now? uh,
I'll even
yeah.
give you a little more context. So DevOps Co-op was one of the early on communities that started,
Hmm.
and it was around 500 odd members when I joined, and so I was actually member number 4 there. And
Hmm.
basically, we joined there, and we had one objective. A lot of times when people post a question in a community, you want to get in front of them and pitch your product. We
Correct.
realized
Yeah.
we're not going to do that at all at any point in time. We are just going to add value, and then if they are interested to learn more, they will reach out to us. Like
Hmm.
someone posts something on the community, answer that question, and then send them a LinkedIn request. Hey, let's say, like, I answered a question over this topic. I saw a question around this topic there. Let's say connected here. And that would mean that when you post again on social, it gets distributed and get in front of their eyes, right? And it never gets easy in terms of keeping track of these community questions as well. So thankfully, when it comes to Slack, it was super helpful that there is a notification around a particular keyword around which you want to basically add value towards, right? Like for us,
Hmm.
it's around,
Hmm.
like, hey, are there any questions about sales commission plan, sales compensation, and generally around commissions in general, and can we, like, get notified that? So used to set up in link, like, in Slack, and Slack used to be on my phone as well. So at, like, sometimes at night 11:30 there is a question that comes in. So the problem is this game was super competitive. So at some point in time, question comes at 11:30 in the night, and by morning someone else would have responded. So
Hmm.
you also need to be first to answer that question. So between us, we always decided, okay, I'll try to be the first person to answer. But if I'm sleeping and it's post 12 a.m. or something, and then there are a couple of few other people who also get notified, then they go ahead and they will go ahead and quickly answer it. So that way, we basically were the first respond. So they're also super excited, right? You post a question and immediately there is a response. They want to read and understand what it is about. And that way, that added us a lot of, gave us a lot of brand traction. And that also meant we started noticing that, hey, the community has a bunch of super relevant ideal customer profiles for us. Why don't we add a little bit longer form value? And we decided, hey, why don't we do a webinar? Why don't we be a partner and do a webinar? So we were actually the first partner for RevOps Co-op.
Hmm.
And because how engaged we were in the community, how much we were engaging in the community on every day on any questions that are coming around RevOps and sales comp in general, they actually didn't charge us for the first year. So $30,000 worth of webinars, we were able to do 7 webinars over the first year free of charge, and we
Hmm.
were able to basically every webinar we used to again kill with content. Like
Hmm.
our webinars used to be around them. Like how can a RevOps person move from a supporting role to strategic role?
Hmm.
It's not about, like, hey, the RevOps best practices, RevOps efficiency, RevOps framework. No, it's about either that or super pointed, like, how do you create the best incentive plans? Like what's the ultimate incentive plan masterclass that you want to watch? And we used to actually keep repeating this content because if you think about it, personally, if what do you care about as a person in a community, right? Like how can you be better at your job? And it needs to be around it. When someone comes and says, how can you use technology to accelerate commissions and accelerate revenue growth? It is loaded, right? They're going to know that you're anyway going, at the end of the
Hmm.
webinar, going to sell me your product. So whenever someone did something like that, they used to get actually 50% of our registration. So how it worked with RevOps Co-op is they used to connect us with the potential new partners and ask us to give our best practices to them in terms of how we got the best webinars. Because for the first year of all the webinars that they happen, our webinars has the highest registrations and the highest turnout. And they were surprised, and that's when we also, the earlier principle that we had on marketing was to add value, and on top of adding value is also being authentic. Don't sell, just be authentic in that. and that basically built us a huge advantage, early mover in the market. And when you get a lot of people coming and consuming your content, tomorrow when they have a problem in sales commissions, you're going to be as part of that shortlist, right? And that was our objective for the first 1.5 years, was to get into the shortlist, because it's a big market and there are always 3 to 4 vendors out there. Can we build enough brand to get into shortlist? And
Right,
post
very
that,
nice.
winning from there is just sales execution, so
Got it.
that we could figure out. But how do we get into the shortlist? Through brand and our subject matter expertise.
Well, this is excellent. I mean, the way I look at it, right? So I've also worked with a lot of companies, consulting. I've consulted a lot of companies, right? So most of the folks, when they do a webinar, they look at number of registrations and try to see how many MQLs I can get from those registrations, and then they eventually send it to route that those leads to inside sales, which is SDR function. SDR generally does a cold call, like follow up and stuff, right? Which is email or LinkedIn stuff. So a lot of the times, what is your piece of advice? I mean, of course, don't.
It doesn't work.
What's a
I'll tell you, it doesn't work. I've heard from hundreds of people. I've tried it once or twice, but from day one, we just send marketing email nurtures with more content for them to learn. Like, we do an incentive plan webinar, send the
so
video of the recording of the webinar to those who didn't attend, send the PDF of incentive plan masterclass that you put together, the deck that you put together, send them more content around, hey, how do you create BDR compensation plans or customer success compensation plans? Just by sending those valuable content, a few people signed up. But when we reach
uh,
out with big areas and other efforts, they just they just get super turned off, right? Like, it's basically, hey, I want to learn something now. You're selling to me. So I think
got
that
it.
fundamentally that was never a very solid argument.
So,
And we also had a BDR team who was very friendly. Like, they also wasn't pushing for, hey, give me all the leads from webinar. More like, hey, how do we get more pipe was their goal. And they also saw this, hey, this webinar is probably not a great, unless someone says that, hey, how does Everstage as a product work, as one of the questions during the webinar, and tells them, hey, I'm looking for a sales commission platform or something. In that case, it's okay to pass them on to BDRs.
hmm,
And our BDRs used to attend our webinars. Like, they used to be part of all our webinars to see what questions are people posting, and then use that to connect with them. Again, not pitching, just building a relationship and then sharing content with them. And that basically is the only thing I've seen worked. Doing, unless it's just demand webinars, you can't do product focused webinars or thought leadership webinars and try to get pipeline out of it. Like, there are
got
better
it.
avenues to do that.
So, and the piece of advice that you give to people who run webinars just for the sake of creating, a lead follow up list for SDRs is a no, right? So, yeah, it's a strict no, right? So, I I get that. So, so we talked about communities, right? So, the early stage, okay, after 6 months, 9 months, right? You have this, community thing going on. You pushed out a lot of content, right? When did you figure out your PMF, right? And when did you figure out that you want to scale, or how did you scale to that 0 to 1 million journey, right? So how did you, one, the first question is when that happened, and the second question is how did you hire your team based on what, right? Do you have a plan in terms of hiring? How did you go from 1 to 2 in terms of people, your process, and of course technology, right? So these three areas.
Yeah. So, in terms of demand itself, I'll come later. First, I'll cover people, process, and technology. So, on the people side, we are very clear. We are going to be content heavy as a firm. So, after
Hmm.
that, all the first few hires we were made by all content marketing folks. So, two people team became a 5 people team of 4 content marketers, and then one of, like, then naturally one of the person translated into, like, hey, can they do more? They've been there around longer, and she took up PMM as an initiative, started working on our website revamp and looking at feature positioning, feature pages, and starting to get a few customers we had, trying to get testimonials and case studies from there. So at that point in time, what we realized very quickly about our market, because it was established, we also understood where the game was happening, like where are these people getting demand out of. And then you see a couple of major players in the market. I don't want to name them. Basically had close to 1,500, 1,800 reviews on review sites, a
Hmm.
couple of review sites. That basically gave us a very quick insight. Like, there is something around this that's working. We probably don't know what that is going to be, but getting customer reviews out there seems like one of the best ways to at least create a social brand. And always our philosophy towards marketing, again, coming from a RevOps point of view, we also didn't have the traditional learnings of marketing, so we don't have to
Hmm.
unlearn anything. So our philosophy first around was like, add value, be authentic, and say third one is don't tell about yourself, don't talk about yourself, have
Hmm.
social proof. Like, you telling about how good a product you have is useless unless the customer comes and vouches for you, it doesn't work. And this naturally fit into the review site hypothesis that we had. So we decided, okay, let's go build that results
Hmm.
and see what happens. In the meanwhile, let's also try inbound to test the waters with some experiments, and then see, are we able to, what's the impressions we are able to get, and what's the traffic like, what can we expect in terms of conversions. So we spent the first year or so building all this content, and then the second year is alone, can we generate demand at some point in time. And basically, the first exercise we did was to go get 200 reviews. And that
Hmm.
basically made a huge difference, because in every call, you can share those reviews with prospects, right? So they convert better. Hey, these are all people that have reviewed at this stage as a product. You look at what they say and then decide from there.
Hmm.
And that basically helped us win a lot of deals as well, because people are getting unbiased feedback from unbiased set of folks. And it's not like a case study that you are sharing where you have written it fully. So that really helped us. And with that, what also happened is G2, we were able to quickly work with them, and they also had a model where they were sharing intent data of people who are visiting the category, the profile
Hmm.
visits, doing the competitor comparisons, etc. So early on, our media team was doing a little bit of outbound, but outbound is difficult when you don't have a brand, right? So we saw this as an opportunity, and we took a call. At least, like, this is where the operations, because everything helps, right? Like, we took a call to say, hey, this seems, first principle wise, this seems like a solid idea where there are people with intent coming and visiting review sites, and who goes to a review site unless they are in the buying cycle or evaluating something, they're not going to go to the review site. So can we figure out a way to reach out to these people on LinkedIn, like,
Hmm.
send a few emails to some buying persona in those firms, and then try to see if we are able to get some opportunities out of it. And that basically worked very, very well for our initial set of demands as well. And we also were able to tie one and two together, right? Because I think this was around 2022 early on, where again, with all this shortage of marketing experience, I was also always consuming marketing content of some form out there. And that's
Hmm.
when everyone started saying, hey, like, Refine Labs used to put out, say, hey, put a how did you hear about us, so that you understand who's coming
Hmm.
to the website, rather than being blind about and just trusting the sources for what it is. And a lot of how did you hear about us also had review sites or a
Okay.
Google search. And if they Google search, a review site comes in the top first page for us as well. So that's when we realized, okay, this is really working, because one, you're getting inbound traction, like, where people are coming direct and organic and telling they heard you from review site. And two, now you have your intent data as well that's working out. And then three, on top of all this, what if, like, G2 had a button to sign up from there? A lot of people are signing up using that and coming to RSC as well. And that basically was the initial breakthrough for us in terms of our demand. And we just figured out a way to, like, capitalize on that.
So this the follow up question on this. Right? So the intent data you talked about. So when it's an intent data, right? So you get your company, like companies that is probably visiting, right? You don't get the persona, right? That's visiting. So do you think, especially when it comes to sales comp and stuff, right? So you probably the persona itself is the number of people on that particular function is probably very little, right? So do you think you had that advantage that in a company you are able to find these prospects or contacts, right, pretty easily compared to a bigger audience, right? Maybe because sales, if you have a sales tech product like outreach, or if you have a marketing martech or a map or like marketing automation product like HubSpot, right? So where you have like a lot of people, even though the decision makers are VP of marketing or CMOs, right, there are other people like 20-25 people on an average, right, for a bigger sized company that you're trying to sell, right? So do you think you had that advantage that you had only maybe a couple of them or maybe three of them in a single company to focus on? Because what I've seen is, especially with the intent data that comes from G2, right? So you pick that, especially when it's an enterprise sized company. For any function you're selling to, if you're selling to IT, you have 100 people, right? And then you're selling to some other function, you have engineering function, you have like 500,000 people, right? So how has that worked? And do you think it was an advantage because you had like maybe a very very small group of audience that you're selling to, and most of the times you will get it right because it's only a small group of audience, right? So how does that work for you?
I've definitely thought about it because a lot of our peers have also used our advice and tried to build intent, and it didn't work for them in some sense. And I think what really matters there is how quickly you're reaching out. I think I would say it's basically some people say, "Hey, I'll get all the intent and then reach out next week." By the time people have forgotten and moved on. So we basically saw a huge uplift in responses by quick reach out times.
Hmm.
And I think the factors around those, like, your persona is little, but also means there is no room for error, right? So you have just
Hmm.
five people in a firm to reach out to. So there is a good chance they are not checking their LinkedIn. So you probably are not going to be convert them as well. When you have 50 people, it's a little more like, you can run a campaign and try to capture as well. But I think that way it was a double-edged sword. It's not like, when you have less number of people, you also won't be able to convert. When you have a lot of people, you also, again, like, the problems of not converting again is you get demotivated by reaching out to so many of them as well. So I think the reach out time, if you're able to optimize, and still if it's not working, I would say that it makes sense. But ideally, if your buyer persona also needs to be your economic buyer,
Hmm.
so when you're looking to sell a marketing product or a sales tech product, so reaching out to a sales leadership or a marketing leadership, that still shouldn't be that big, especially when we are talking about, I'm talking about companies less than 5,000 employees, right? Not like enterprise. That's not the segment where you would want to do intent-based reach out, because if someone from HP visits your website, like, what are you going to do? Like, there
Yeah.
are a million people working there. So at a certain ICP segment, certain set of customers, it works where you
Hmm.
can figure out a way to reach out to the economic buyers and use that as a starting point to get foothold into the account. That was really helpful. But again, for every company, it's different. So you have to test and see what's going to work for you.
But thanks everyone for watching this episode. Stay tuned for the next episode and please subscribe. Thank you.